Hey guys, here I am again. We're going to do a lecture on aggression. Let me get my pen together here. I love this little guy right here. Hey, when I talk about aggression, I want to divide it into two halves today. The first half is nature, so that's going to be how we're born with aggressive tendencies. We've evolved as a species, so it's inherent. We're hardwired with this tendency. And the second half of the lecture will be more like how we've learned it from our parents, our peers, friends, TV, other sources. Oh yeah, I have this little baby on here, so you can see he's kind of like displaying it's like demon baby right here, and so he's already immediately displaying. Now, Charles Darwin is one of the early researchers to say, yeah, aggression is a part, of our survival, right? It's not always, the survival of the fittest is the most aggressive, but sometimes it is. We saw that within polygyny and some of the other things I talked about earlier. Walter Cannon will write in the title of his theory is fight or flight, run. You either run really fast or fight really hard. That's the purpose of the adrenaline rush. The sympathetic nervous system kicks on and it helps us survive. And so maybe aggression from a natural standpoint is, easily understood. When you need to, you're backed into a corner, you become aggressive to protect yourself. Now, I love Karl Marx. You might not like him, but I love what he says right here. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, is the opium of the people. The animals may be like really rowdy and crazy, but you get them scared of God or going to hell, and it'll calm people down. So I don't have to get into that lecture today. But if you're in my religion class, I go off on that lecture. Okay, so Sigmund Freud, he's one of my first big guy I want to talk about. You don't have to remember these dates right here. I love talking about him. If you've had me in other classes, you've seen me talk about him, but I'm going to talk about some of his basic theories that relate specifically to aggression. Okay, first things first. Freud sees us as animals. We're an animal, people, and we have these animalistic instincts. And the first instinct we have is called eros. Eros is our life drive, but he has a big heart on here. And the reason I have a heart on here is because eros means Cupid, right? It's the same thing as Cupid. And he sees our sex drive and our life drive being the same thing. Now, there's a lot of controversy. In my other class, I could get into it a little bit more. That's one of the drives we have as human beings, life drive or sex drive, and he calls it libido, right? So Thanatos is our second drive, which is our death drive. We have this self-destructive or death drive, and so it can be directed inwards, which I would hurt myself, right? Or outwards, where I would hurt other people. So Thanatos can go one of two ways. So this is the one that's going to relate most to today's lecture. Eros was from last time, all that stuff on a track. Now, one thing I wanted to say about how Freud sees your mind. If you've been in my intro class, you know this. But he says, this is, I think, his biggest contribution, that what you're currently thinking about is just the tip of an iceberg. But an iceberg has a lot more material under the water. It's bigger under the water than it is above the water. So there's a lot more information in your mind that you're not currently thinking about. So let's say I ask you where you went to high school or what your mother's name is. That would like easily rise up here to the surface and you could tell me all about that. I better get my eraser on here because I'm getting like pen happy. So you could easily bring that information up. That's the preconscious. Now, I'm not interested in that. The unconscious, what Freud is most interested in, is because it's this information way down here, if I can get my pen on, that we can't usually access. We've actually locked or hidden it. It could be secrets. In my other class, I talk a lot about secrets, but in this class, I talk about primitive drives, like homicidal drives, suicidal drives, all these things you're not supposed to do, right? And so he says that we try to lock all that stuff away and we keep it buried down there, and so we make it a secret from ourselves. Okay, so this might sound all weird, and how does this like really help us out? But this is where I'm going to go with it. Okay, I usually use this analogy of a beach ball. You could say, oh, a secret doesn't bother me because I've buried it down here. I say, okay, we'll push that beach ball down for a while, and what's going to happen is it's going to always want to rise to the top. So the more you try to bury a secret, the more psychic energy you're always like involved with. If you just let go of it and finally address, this is why I tell secrets. You already know me. I'm so transparent because fuck the beach ball. Just say it. Just say what it is, and then the beach ball has no power over you. Otherwise, you spend the rest of your fucking life hiding that fucking beach ball. That's no bueno. Okay, so one of the things we might hide down there is our primitive drives, this Eros and Thanatos I've been harping on. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. And so I have my Cat Williams story, but basically it's this. This is a true story. Back in the day, I think it's maybe about 10 years ago, these two people in California climbed into the tiger cage and they got eaten. Now, the day after, the news is like, we got to put the tiger down. The tiger went crazy. Why would he do this? On and on and on. And Cat Williams comes on his stand-up routine and says, all the news is like kind of crazy. They're saying the tiger went crazy. They're saying this, that, and the other about the tiger. I tell you what, them tigers didn't go crazy. Those people climbed to that cage, and them tigers went tiger. That's what tigers do. They're a primordial beast, but they're not kitty cats. People, these two people are dummies thinking it's going to be a kitty cat. Now, if you think about human beings in this way, that human beings, he sees you as an animal, have this idinal component. The id right here, I should pick a different color, right? The id is that tiger part of us. It's the sex, the violence, all the stuff we want to do, but we won't tell anybody we want to do it because, like, we're kitty cats and we're in society. We want to go off on a mother effer. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe you don't. But we have this part of our personality. So the iceberg is your mind. This is your personality that knows that you can get in trouble for going tiger. Like if you go punch somebody in the face, the cops might show up, right? And so it keeps the tiger in its cage. You have to learn this, though. If you just let a kid grow up and never know about any rules, maybe they would go tiger, right? Tigers go tiger. That's just Freud's thing. Now, Freud's an atheist, but he also believes we have this other part of ourself called the superego, and this keeps the tiger in the cage because of moral consequences. It's like, oh my God, you'll be a bad boy and go to hell, or all this other stuff. So he doesn't think that God created man. He believes that man created God in his own image. That's why God's a white dude and is always angry. You know what I mean? But we don't have to go into this. But I'm big on superego because I'm just like morality should control the tiger even if nobody finds out. But in both cases, if you see these things as leashes, pushing down onto the tiger and keeping sex and violence at bay, because normally the tiger would want to do these two things. The whole reason we have a commandment, thou shalt not kill, makes it certain that we're descended from an endlessly long chain of generation of murderers. If we weren't tigers, we wouldn't have to have tiger rules. And so if I can come back to it, you have this and you have these two things that are pushing down on them. And so these things that are pushing down onto the tiger, the superego and the ego, they're just a list of rules that control our instincts, that try to make us kitty cats. And this is my point. People go, oh, none of this makes sense. It's like, oh, okay, go turn on the news tonight and see if somebody didn't go tiger and ignore these two things. That's where Freud's right. People are like tigers, and they're gonna go tiger and snap. And most of us are scared by these two things. I am by the popo, and scared of God, like what's gonna happen if I'm a bad person. I am scared about that, and so that keeps my tiger in the cage most of the time. Okay. So hopefully I made sense on that couple of slides about my kind of primer on Freud's theories. I feel like I went through some of that stuff fast, but this is what I want to reiterate basically, and it has to do with riding horses. I don't know if you've ever ridden horses, but I've ridden a lot of horses, and one of the things my grandpa used to get mad about is if I would let the horse like guide me back towards the barn, because you have the illusion you're riding. This is why I don't go on horse rides out here. You're not riding a horse. You're just like a sack of potatoes on a horse, and you can just let go of the reins because it's going to follow the horse in front of you on trail rides. It's like I want to gallop across the pasture and force the horse to do stuff because you're guiding the horse. And this is what Freud says, this whole, oh, these unbeknownst hidden things are really controlling me. All these beach balls I've hidden are in control of my behavior instead of the top of my iceberg, which is what I'm currently thinking about. And in this analogy, he says, it's kind of like when you're riding a horse. The ego up here thinks it's in control because it's, has the reins. But the id is the horse, and the id is a lot bigger. And a lot of the times what the ego does is the rider guides his horse in the direction in which the horse already wanted to go, like back to the barn. And they go, look, Grandpa, I'm riding the horse back to the barn. It's like, no, the horse is taking you back to the barn, and you're just making up a story that you're riding the horse. And if that doesn't make any sense, I'm sorry, but it makes perfect sense to me. And the perfect movie for me to talk about is this movie right here. I love Shutter Island because when he's on the island right here, there's something that's eating at him. And the something that's eating at him is this secret or beach ball. I could have made it. And it's this secret he's locked away from himself. You could say no, but his mind is in control. No, the secret, which is buried, and he keeps trying to bury it, is really in control. It's like, what did his wife do in the lake to those kids? But he doesn't want to look at it. He denies he's even had kids before. And so that secret keeps popping up over and over through the movie in these water motifs because he can't deal with that. So he's locked that information away, what she did to the kids in the lake, and put it way down there so he never has to look at it. But he thinks he's in control, riding the horse back to the barn to get oats. Okay, so what's this all about? When you have these secrets down here, or you have this primitive information, tiger information, and it comes up to the top, sometimes the writer doesn't like that. And what Freud says is we have ways, the ego, the conscious mind, this is what Shutter Island is completely about, how his conscious mind is pushing that information back down. And so I have 5 ego defense mechanisms that relate somewhat to aggression. I'm going to briefly go through these 5 on the next few slides. Okay, the first eco defense mechanism is called repression. Let's say you smoke. Well, you know smoking's bad for you, but if you just don't think about that it's bad for you, you can just smoke your head off. And so that's a mild form of an ego defense mechanism. Yeah, the secret, I guess, would be that smoking is bad for you, but you just kind of hide that in your iceberg and don't think about it. The deeper form is really called denial, where you lock that shit away. This is why I love Shutter Island. He's locked that secret away about his wife and the kids. He just says he doesn't even have kids. He doesn't even remember it because he has to lock it away. And this quote from Nietzsche, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. My other favorite quote is this: denial is the glue that holds a dysfunctional family together. And this is why sometimes I'm at odds with my family because I have to say what the truth is. Y'all know me, I'm real transparent. And this is why, because I think locking away secrets is like pushing those beach balls down, hoping they'll stay down in the bottom of the iceberg. Now, number 2, rationalization. Everybody knows what that means. It seems like when you rationalize something, you make excuses, you justify. So I'm just going to argue we're all tigers. At some point in your life, you're going to yell, scream. Maybe you're going to hit somebody, break something, do something that's not nice and genteel. You know what I mean? And so later on, you'll go, well, they had it coming, or I, needed to do that, display my anger. And so you justify in some way why you took something, hit somebody, but acted basically like an animal. And so that one's real easy to understand, rationalization. The third one I call misplacement. Okay, why don't I have a goat on here? This is the reason I have a goat on here. You don't have to remember any of this bullshit, but it comes from, religion class, if you were in my religion class. Back in the day, if you're Hebrew and you had sinned, you went and you were supposed to get one of your best male goats or lambs, and take it up to the temple, and then you place your sins upon the lamb or the goat, and then the lamb or the goat would get slaughtered by the priest over here. It's like, okay, well, the goat's just being a goat. That's just where we get scapegoat from. You misplace the blame on an innocent, right? So here you're misplacing aggression on an innocent. Now, back to religion class. Whenever Jesus first comes on the scene, one of the first things that's said about him is, "Behold the Lamb of God." Everybody's, "Oh, that's sweet, he's the Lamb of God." It's like, no, it's not. Guess what happens to lambs? This stuff right over here. It's the foreshadowing that he's going to get slaughtered. Why? Because he's the innocent, or he put all the sins for the whole humanity on him and he gets slaughtered. This way is my hero. You know what I mean? And so he's the lamb. And right at the end of his life, before he ascends to heaven, he says three words: "It is finished." There's no more killing lambs from that tradition. That's the old covenant. I have fulfilled the new covenant. I was the last lamb and the last sacrifice. I don't know if that makes sense, but you don't have to remember any of that. I have this little thing over here. I can erase this off of here. Aggression may be taken out on people with no connection to what is really causing the anger. Let's say a dad is like having a really bad day at work. He drives home, traffic's horrible. Then he gets home, there's his wife and kids, and he just starts railing on their ass. He's yelling and screaming. It's like they didn't do anything. They were just over here being an innocent, and he's misplacing the anger onto them. Number four is projection. One of the things I might hide in the bottom of my iceberg are things I don't like about Tim. And as they surface, I could look at them, or I could start to notice them in other people instead of myself. That's projection. Sometimes the other people really have them and sometimes they don't. But I start to see, let's say if you have an anger problem or you're really critical, and so instead of seeing it in yourself, it's like, Tim, you need to work on these things, you start to see it in other people, friends, family members, strangers you meet. And so you're projecting your stuff you can't deal with onto other people. The last one is called sublimation. Sublimation is when you take all that violent tiger energy and you channel it into something good. Okay, this says channel primal impulses into socially acceptable activities. Okay, so you channel tiger energy into something good. Let me just give you an example. Music. One of my favorite, artists, especially when he first came out, is Eminem. I mean, when he first came out, he was angry as a motherfucker, but he was channeling all that anger right into his fucking music, like Rage Against the Machine. This is why I love these. Don't get me started. I'll go crazy right now. You know what I mean? But that's why I like also violent art, because people go, "Oh, that's bad," but it's like, yeah, but you're getting out the tiger onto the canvas, into the music, instead of onto somebody. Football, other activities that are sports do the same thing. You sublimate the tiger energy, and the idea is then later on you'll be less like a tiger. Now, I hope I made sense on these 5 ego defense mechanisms, but if you have any questions, definitely give me an email. Okay, so the next section is appropriate frustration and aggression. I love this little picture right. The idea is if you think you're going to get something and then you don't get it, that will make you really frustrated. Think about a video game. I should have put video games on here because anytime I think I'm going to pass a level and then something out of nowhere just stops and it's like, oh my God, it makes you so mad. And so, well, another thing that makes you frustrated is things that involve competition, right? Especially if there's not enough to go around, and we'll get into this later, not enough to go around, huh? That's what's going to happen, right? People get competitive. It's musical chairs in my other class, religion class, especially go off on this because if there's not enough chairs to go around, when the music goes off, there's going to be a fight. Okay, so Dollard, one of the first people to talk about aggression, made this bold claim that all frustration leads to aggression. Well, maybe people are more mature. They don't have to break things or yell just because they're frustrated. And that all forms of aggression come from frustration. Maybe, but maybe you're just trying to protect yourself, like self-defense or something. Okay, so Berkowitz in the 70s tried to update this theory. So that first theory was from the 30s. And so what he says is frustration leads to anger. And anger is an emotional readiness to go off on somebody. But doesn't mean you have to get aggressive. And so he says you will only get aggressive if the appropriate cues, that says appropriate right here, are present. Appropriate cues, what does that mean? I call them buttons. That's why I have this button. But the cues would be like, well, if something's unfair, This first one. He says people will become aggressive. If they perceive something's unfair, then that completely unleashes the anger. For me, it is. It's like, but it's not fair. It's like, Tim, calm down. But it's not fair. You know what I mean? And so that's one for me to work on. The second one, if something happens unexpectedly, like just out of nowhere, you lose your job during the coronavirus, right? It's not fair and you didn't see it coming. And so both things should unleash the anger. One of the things that they study in biology is releasing stimuli or stimulus. And so this red dot, if you put a herring gull around it, it will immediately attack it. Just even if you just paint a red dot on a stick, it'll attack the stick out of nowhere. Paint it on the wall, it attacks it on the wall. Why does it attack this red dot? Because conspecifics, other males have a red dot, and it's male-male competition, and it's been hardwired into their behavior. So just like a bull sees a red cave, bam, I'm going to attack it, right? It unleashes the anger. Well, we as humans might have things that get like now, this is not me. This is Berkowitz. Says weapons are like this. This is why I don't own weapons. Not you can have as many weapons as you want to. I don't trust Tim with a gun. You know what I mean? Because I think I'll use it on me. If you look at what Berkowitz talks about, is like in the United States we have the most guns, and we also have the most murders by guns. And he's like arguing that when you get mad and there's a gun there, it's not going to be like, oh, we get into a fist fight. It's like, I'm going to shoot your ass. You know what I mean? And so this illusion to protect yourself right here in 2010, only 230 people protected themselves, and the rest of the people that died, most of them were suicides, are criminal on criminal deaths. And so, get off my soapbox. I don't even like getting on that soapbox, but whatever. Okay, this is the soapbox I really want to get on, which is economic frustration integration, because nothing makes me madder than if my bank account gets fucked with. So, as you get more and more successful, something odd happens. Not for everybody, but for some people. What they find is you start making upward comparisons instead of looking down at how far you've come. And so it makes you less happy, so that people that get richer and richer get less and less and less happy because they're always looking at richer and richer people that have more than they have up the ladder instead of down the ladder. Now, this is called relative deprivation because you're really not suffering right here. You're just suffering because you're comparing yourself to this guy over here. This is called America. You know what I mean? So Karl Marx, my commie friend here, he says a house may be large or small, but let next to the little house arise a palace, and the little house shrinks to a hut. Now, you don't have to go completely communistic, but it's just crazy the disparity, in the distribution. And one of the things I talk about is water because it's not so controversial, right? You should have clean water to drink. Like, this is why I love soldiers, because my friend Doug, when he came back from Afghanistan in his first tour of duty, he says, Tim, you have one of those things on the wall where you can, like, turn it on and some water comes out, you're like a millionaire. You know what I mean? It's like, because if you look down here, more people have a mobile phone than a toilet, lack of access to clean water and sanitation. It's like putting a bunch of kids on a jumbo jet and crashing one every 4 hours, all day long for 24 hours a day, like every single day of the year. And then 3.4 million people die each year from water, sanitation, and hygiene-related causes. Now, if you ask people in the first world what their problem is, a little kid made this up. That's why I love showing it. Had to park far from door. My show wasn't in HD last night, and there was too much goat cheese on my salad. If you ask people in the third world what their problems are, it's like, I might get raped, I might starve to death, or get cholera. So the more rich you get, it seems like the more grouchy you get. Really, if you look at distribution of wealth, half of the world owns, less than a fifth of its wealth. But a fifth of the world down here owns 2/3 of the wealth. Now, it doesn't have to be completely fair, but this is the thing I would focus on, and then I'll get off my soapbox. What I want to tell everybody, even about the coronavirus. During the coronavirus, every day 20,000 kids died from starving or not having clean water. Every single day. And so everybody's like, oh my God, this many people died in the world. It's like, yeah, but a lot of people died in the world that we didn't talk about. And so that's enough about that. And now I'll move on to the next topic. Okay, so now we'll switch gears a little bit because we're on learning. So now where nurture comes into play, even some of the previous stuff was still nature heavy a little bit, but now we're going to talk about how we learn to. So TV violence is where I'm going to go with this. This is one of the last sections. And so George Gerbner back in the 70s and even into the 80s would do this weird thing where he would just count how many murders and rapes and assaults were on TV. He'd sit around doing. And he noticed that 2/3 of TV programs, especially in prime time hours, have violence in them. You don't have to remember these statistics at all. And that there's 5 violent incidents per viewing hour, and that by the time you've reached high school, you've seen 13,000 deaths or murders, people getting killed on TV. And you can say, well, that doesn't affect. So here's what he did in some of his studies. He says, how likely do you think you are to get hurt? This is why I don't watch the news all the time. If you watch the news on TV all the time, you're saying, I'm 1 in 10 likely to be a victim of violent crime. This is why I'm also against guns. And so light viewers say, no, it's 1 in 100 because they're not watching the news all the time, seeing murders and rapes and all kinds of stuff on TV. The actual number is down here, one in 1,000. So now you get overly paranoid. Why? Because you just watch TV, watch TV, watch TV. That's called the availability heuristic. If you just keep looking at something over and over and over, that's the first thing that comes in your mind. So heavy viewers overestimate criminal activity and are more suspicious of other people. I don't want to ask a cop what he thinks about human nature because all he does is look at criminals all day long. And so this is the reason I have to turn off the news and like go hiking or do something else, because that becomes my meditation, what comes up into my mind most often. Okay, so 4 effects of TV violence for the test. Number 1, it just gets you into a violent mode of thinking. This is why sometimes I can't just drive around listening to angry heavy metal and angry hip hop because it's like, fuck these motherfuckers. You know what I mean? I just get really mad. It's like, why are you getting mad, Tim? It's like, you're listening to mad music. It's like, stop listening to mad music, right? So number 2, you learn new techniques. This is why my brother Matt, ironically, had to stop watching wrestling when he was younger, because he would learn all the technique or try all the techniques on his friends at school, and then they would get hurt. We would get calls at home from the principal or whatever. Ironically, he's an MMA fighter that trains other MMA fighters right now. Okay, so number 3, it just says it's okay to be violent. If I see violence on TV all the time, should I keep the tiger in the cage? I mean, maybe I can be Tiger. This is the difference between Europe and America. In Europe, they have a lot of sex on TV, so that part of the tiger is celebrated. It's like here in America, we celebrate the violent part of the tiger. You can show all kinds of murders and everything else on TV, but don't show too much sex. Okay, so the 4th one is it just numbs you out. After you've seen so many violent things happen, like 13,000 murders. What's another one? Okay, so those hopefully are easy to understand. Once again, if I move through some of this stuff too fast, you definitely send me an email. Okay, last section is reducing aggression. Can we get rid of aggression? I hope so, because otherwise the world is kind of. Now, one of the ideas is if you blow off steam, this is the idea behind like hiking, sports, running. I can blow off steam, it'll get it out of my system. And this catharsis word came from the Greek plays because they were supposed to be cathartic when you saw it. It should be purging you of your emotions. This says blowing off steam over here. And so scientists started to investigate. If you let people blow off steam, do they get less angry? So the first study is an in 1974, Patterson looked at football players. You get to be aggressive, blow off steam during the football season. So are you less aggressive after the football season because you blew off steam? And so he measured 1 week before the season and 1 week after to test this theory. And what did he find? Players are more aggressive after the season. You get into a violent mode of thinking, and it's like, well, now I'm violent. I want to be violent some more. It's like instead of, oh, I blew up all this steam, I don't want to be violent anymore. And so actually most of the research out there shows this, that violence begets violence, or this blowing off steam actually is building up steam. And so it's called venting. Sorry that went away so fast, but venting, and there's some research on venting, and psychological research has shown virtually no support. You don't have to remember this for the beneficial effects of venting. And so instead, sorry, I can't talk right there, suggests that it increases the likelihood of anger. Why? Because you're both like, I know you shouldn't put up with that. This is why when you call somebody and you're mad and then they get mad for you and back and forth, that's not making you less mad. It's actually making you want to go do the thing more. Okay, so therapy, I always think about this because sometimes I go away from my therapist and I'm madder than when I showed up because what did I do? Vent about my family or my dad or all these other things that I can't deal with. And then it's like, damn it, makes me madder and madder instead of if I just didn't go there and vent in the first place. Last two things I was going to show, they kind of relate to that football player study. You might not like either one of these movies. I love them. They're two of my favorite movies. In First Blood, he got to be a warrior over in Vietnam. Now, when he came home, the football season's over. It's like, what do? I can't be a warrior anymore. Well, maybe I can. Same thing with Benicio del Toro. You know what I mean? He was an assassin. All of a sudden, the war's over. Now, what he's going to do in civilian life? It's like, is he going to go back to being a kitty cat? So you train him to be the ultimate tiger. Same thing here. You've trained him to be the ultimate tiger. You can't go back to being a kitty cat civilian anytime soon. Okay, I hope this lecture on aggression was pretty good. I'll try to do a better job next time. I'll see y'all later.